The crystal chandelier above table 7 threw fractured light across white linen, catching the diamond bracelet on the wrist of the woman who would destroy everything. Sienna Brooks moved through the Oriette's dining room with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned to be seen only when necessary, her dark hands steady as she refilled water glasses for Boston's elite. The woman at table 7, pale skin, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, a navy dress that cost more than 3 months of Sienna's rent, hadn't looked up once in the 90 minutes since the charity gala began. Not until Sienna reached for her empty wine glass. Their eyes met for half a second. Recognition flared in the older woman's gaze, sharp and calculating before her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Sienna's fingers tightened on the stem of the glass. She knew that face. 28 years had changed the details, smoothed away by expensive procedures, hardened by whatever life the woman had lived after walking away, but the eyes remained the same. Cold, assessing. Vivian. The glass slipped. Sienna caught it before it hit the table, her pulse hammering against her throat. She stepped back, muscle memory from 2 years of service keeping her movements smooth even as her vision tunneled. Vivian leaned forward, voice pitched low beneath the string quartet's rendition of Vivaldi. "My daughter." The words landed like a diagnosis. "Tomorrow my lawyer will contact you. I'm taking my granddaughter home where she belongs." The room continued around them. 300 guests in evening wear, discussing philanthropy over seared scallops and Chilean sea bass. The mayor at table 1. 2 Superior Court judges near the windows, a Pulitzer winner somewhere in the back. None of them knew that the elegant donor at table 7 had just detonated a bomb that would leave exactly 1 casualty. Sienna's hands found the water pitcher on autopilot. She poured, moved to the next table, smiled at someone's joke about the weather. Her brain kept circling back, trying to make the math work. Vivian Ashford. Because of course she'd taken back her maiden name after shedding every other piece of her past. Owned 6 luxury spas across New England. The invitation list had called her a philanthropist. The program notes mentioned her generous donation to the Children's Hospital. Nowhere did it say she'd abandoned her 6-year-old daughter with a grandmother too sick to work and disappeared for 28 years without a phone call. The kitchen's fluorescent lights felt like an interrogation after the dining room's amber glow. Sienna leaned against the stainless steel counter, forcing air into her lungs. Isaiah found her there 3 minutes later, concern creasing the skin around his eyes. He'd managed the Oriette for 15 years, had hired Sienna when no law firm in Massachusetts would return her calls after the disciplinary board suspended her license. He knew about Zara, about the studio apartment in Roxbury where Sienna's 4-year-old daughter slept in a bed wedged between the kitchenette and the bathroom door. He didn't know about Vivian. "You sick?" His voice carried the gentle authority of someone used to making decisions quickly. "I can cover your tables. I'm fine." The lie tasted metallic. "Just need a minute." She wasn't fine. Her phone, tucked into her locker, held 17 unread messages. Probably from the daycare, wondering why pickup was running late again. Probably from the landlord asking about the rent check that had bounced on Friday. Definitely not from Vivian, because mothers who planned legal warfare didn't send warning texts. The rest of the shift passed in fragments. Clearing dessert plates, pouring coffee. Watching Vivian hold court at table 7. Her laugh crystalline and manufactured, while Sienna's hands shook so badly she had to set down a tray of champagne flutes before she dropped them. At 11:15, when the last guests finally drifted toward the coat check, Sienna collected her tips, $463, the best night in months, and knew it wouldn't matter. The tea was nearly empty on the ride to Roxbury. Sienna stared at her reflection in the dark window, trying to find traces of the person she'd been 3 years ago. Before Zara, before the suspension, back when she'd been the youngest associate at Sullivan and Cromwell's family law division, pulling 70-hour weeks on custody cases that made junior partners weep. She'd been good at it, brilliant even, the kind of good that got you noticed, that put your name on track for early partnership. Then she'd noticed the discrepancies in the Harrison case. Small things at first, dates that didn't align, testimony that contradicted earlier depositions. Rebecca Harrison, 42 and fighting for custody of her twin daughters, kept insisting her ex-husband's lawyer had fabricated evidence. Her own lawyer, a senior partner named Douglas Chen, told her she was paranoid, told Sienna to focus on her own cases. When Sienna kept digging, kept finding more inconsistencies, Chen pulled her into his office with a choice: drop it or lose everything. She'd gone to the disciplinary board anyway, presented 6 months of documentation proving Chen had falsified psychiatric evaluations, bribed a court-appointed guardian, and conspired with the husband's legal team to paint Rebecca as an unfit mother. The board had thanked her for her diligence, opened an investigation, and suspended Sienna's license pending review. Professional courtesy, they'd called it. Can't have associates undermining senior partners without concrete proof. The fact that Sienna's file disappeared from the board's servers 3 weeks later, along with every email she'd sent, only proved how deep the corruption ran. Chen still practiced law. Rebecca lost her daughters, and Sienna learned that justice was a commodity, available only to those who could afford the right connections. The apartment was dark when she finally got home at midnight. Mrs. Chen from 3B, no relation to Douglas, thank God, had agreed to watch Zara for an extra $40, money Sienna didn't have but would find somewhere. Zara was asleep on the fold-out couch, her small body curled around a stuffed elephant that had been Sienna's at the same age. The only thing Grandmother Brooks had kept from Sienna's childhood, passed down before cancer took her when Sienna was 16. Sienna stood in the doorway watching her daughter's chest rise and fall, 4 years old. The same age Sienna had been when Vivian left her with Grandmother Brooks for "Just a few weeks, sweetheart. Mommy needs to find herself." Those weeks had stretched into months, then years, then silence. No calls, no letters, just a check for $300 every month deposited like clockwork until Sienna turned 18 and it stopped. Grandmother Brooks had filled the gap, worked 2 jobs, school cafeteria during the day, hotel housekeeping at night to keep their 1-bedroom in Dorchester. Taught Sienna that love was action, not words, that dignity came from showing up, doing the work, being there when it mattered. She'd lived long enough to see Sienna get into Harvard Law on a full scholarship, long enough to say she was proud before the cancer spread too far for even her iron will to fight. Sienna had sworn she'd be different, better, the kind of mother who stayed, who fought, who never let her child feel the specific abandonment of being left behind by the person who was supposed to love you most. Now Vivian wanted to take Zara away, and Sienna's hands were still shaking. She found the envelope at 6 the next morning, wedged under her door. Thick cream paper embossed with the logo of Whitfield and Associates, one of Boston's most expensive family law firms. Inside, 17 pages of legal filing requesting emergency custody of Zara Simone Brooks on grounds of parental neglect and financial instability. Sienna read it standing in her bathrobe, coffee going cold on the counter while Zara watched cartoons 3 feet away. The petition was surgical in its precision. It documented every late pickup from daycare over the past 6 months, 14 instances helpfully highlighted. It included photographs of the apartment, the unmade bed, Zara's toys scattered across the floor, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter visible through the window. A private investigator's report detailed Sienna's work schedule. 63 hours last week, 58 the week before, night shifts that meant Zara spent 12-hour stretches at Bright Horizons daycare. Bank statements showing an overdraft fee in March, another in April, a third just last week. And on page 9, the kill shot, medical records from Boston General Psychiatric Unit, dated 4 years ago. Sienna's name at the top, diagnosis of acute stress disorder following a workplace incident, prescribed course of therapy and medication. The notes mentioned intrusive thoughts, Difficulty bonding with newborn. Risk assessment recommended follow-up. Sienna's vision went white around the edges. She'd sought help when Zara was 3 months old, when the exhaustion and fear had calcified into something darker. 2 sessions with a therapist who'd assured her this was normal. This was manageable. This wasn't failure. The medication had helped. The thoughts had passed. She'd never gone back because she couldn't afford it, but the crisis had ended and life had continued. She'd never told anyone about those sessions. The records were supposed to be sealed. HIPAA violations aside, there was no legal way Vivian should have accessed them unless... The signature at the bottom of the psychiatric evaluation was illegible, but the facility name was clear: Boston General Behavioral Health. Sienna pulled up her laptop, fingers clumsy on the keys, cross-referenced the facility's employment records from 2021, found what she was looking for on page 3 of the nursing staff directory. Vivian Ashford, RN, Psychiatric Intake Coordinator. Employed from 2019 to 2022. The coffee mug hit the floor. Ceramic shattered across linoleum, brown liquid spreading in a stain that Sienna would never quite scrub out. Zara looked up from the television, her dark eyes, Sienna's eyes, Grandmother Brooks's eyes, wide with concern. "Mama okay?" "I'm fine, baby." Another lie. Sienna grabbed paper towels, knelt to clean the mess before Zara's bare feet found the broken pieces. "Just clumsy this morning." Vivian hadn't just accessed the records, she'd been there, had seen Sienna at her lowest, most vulnerable, most terrified, and had filed that information away like ammunition, had waited 4 years to use it. The calculation required a particular kind of patience, a specific brand of cruelty that Sienna recognized from childhood. The same cold assessment that had looked at 6-year-old Sienna and decided she was an acceptable loss. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, family court Judge Marion Portman presiding. Sienna knew Portman by reputation, fair but strict, intolerant of parents who put their needs above their children's. The kind of judge who'd take one look at those bank statements and late pickups and see exactly what Vivian wanted her to see: a struggling single mother barely keeping her head above water. Sienna called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Dropped Zara at daycare with a kiss and a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. "I'll be here at 5:30, baby, I promise." And took the T to Cambridge. Sullivan and Cromwell's offices occupied 4 floors of a glass tower overlooking the Charles River. Sienna had sworn she'd never go back, but desperation made liars of everyone. The receptionist didn't recognize her. 3 years was a lifetime in lawyer years. Sienna asked for Amanda Reyes, her old cubicle mate, and waited in the lobby with its view of the river and its leather furniture that cost more than her car. Amanda appeared 15 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral. "Sienna, I heard you were..." She stopped, reset. "Good to see you." They found an empty conference room. Amanda listened while Sienna explained the situation, her manicured nails tapping against a leather portfolio. When Sienna finished, Amanda was quiet for a long moment. "You need a lawyer." "I can't afford a lawyer, not one who can go up against Whitfield." "Then you need to accept Vivian's offer." Sienna's stomach dropped. "What offer?" Amanda's expression flickered, surprise, then understanding, then something that might have been pity. She pulled out her phone, tapped through messages, turned the screen towards Sienna. The email was from Whitfield's managing partner. Sent yesterday. It outlined a settlement proposal. Vivian would withdraw the custody petition if Sienna agreed to voluntary co-guardianship. Vivian would have unlimited visitation rights, veto power over major decisions regarding Zara's education and health care, and the right to provide primary residence if she deemed Sienna's living situation inadequate at any point. "It's surrender." Sienna's voice came out flat. "Just slower." "It's pragmatic." Amanda closed her phone. "You fight this, you lose. Vivian has resources, connections, and apparently evidence you can't refute. You sign the agreement, you at least stay in Zara's life." The Charles River glittered beyond the windows, full of sailboats and sunlight and people whose biggest problem was probably where to have brunch. Sienna thought about Zara's laugh, the way she insisted on wearing her purple rain boots even when it wasn't raining, how she'd started drawing pictures of Mama and me that Sienna kept in a folder like they were precious documents. How many of those moments would survive Vivian's version of co-guardianship? "Thanks for your time." Sienna stood. "I'll figure something out." Amanda caught her arm at the door. "Sienna, I mean this kindly. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your kid is admit you can't win." The T back to Roxbury was crowded with lunch-hour commuters. Sienna stood pressed against the doors, staring at her phone's black screen, trying to see a path forward that didn't end with Zara calling Vivian Mommy and forgetting Sienna's face. The legal options were limited. Without her license, she couldn't represent herself effectively. Without money, she couldn't hire representation. Without evidence to counter Vivian's claims, she couldn't fight the narrative. But Vivian had made a mistake. Had to have. People who built empires on image and influence always left cracks in the foundation. Sienna just had to find them before the hearing, before Portman made a decision that couldn't be undone. The apartment felt smaller in daylight. Sienna pulled out her laptop, opened a fresh document, and started writing down everything she knew. Vivian's employment timeline, the nursing license she'd used to access sealed medical records, the private investigator who'd photographed through Sienna's windows, which might constitute surveillance violations. The timeline didn't make sense. Vivian had been at Boston General when Sienna came in for help, but the intake paperwork showed a different nurse's signature, someone named Lyons. Sienna pulled up the hospital's old staff directory again, searching for connections. Her phone rang at 2:30. Unknown number. Sienna almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Sienna Brooks?" Male voice, professional cadence, vaguely familiar. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dr. Robert Ellis. I'm a retired psychiatrist, formerly with Boston General. I received a rather disturbing call this morning from a colleague regarding unauthorized access to patient files. Your name was mentioned." Sienna sat up straighter. "I didn't access anything. I'm the patient." "I'm aware." Papers rustled in the background. "I'm calling because I reviewed your case file from 2021. Or rather, I reviewed what someone wants the court to believe is your case file. The evaluation in your mother's custody petition contains diagnoses and risk assessments I never made. The signature is mine, but the content has been altered." The room tilted. Sienna gripped the edge of the table. "You're sure?" "Ms. Brooks, I worked in psychiatric medicine for 40 years. I know my own handwriting, and I know my diagnostic criteria. You presented with textbook postpartum adjustment difficulties. Mild depression, manageable with therapy. I recommended follow-up, not because I thought you were a danger, but because all new mothers benefit from support. Someone took my notes and turned you into a liability. Can you testify to that? I can do better. I have the original file. I keep copies of all my cases even after retirement." His voice softened. "I also have another file you should know about, from 1996, a custody evaluation for a woman named Helen Brooks, who was seeking guardianship of her granddaughter after her daughter abandoned the child. The daughter's name was Vivian Ashford." Sienna's breath caught. "My grandmother tried to take me?" "She tried to formalize the arrangement after your mother hadn't visited in 18 months. Vivian fought it, claimed she was establishing her career and would return once stable. The judge ruled in Vivian's favor. Parental rights supersede grandparents unless there's proof of harm. Your grandmother withdrew the petition rather than put you through a trial." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Vivian came to see me 6 months after that hearing. Asked me to evaluate your grandmother's mental fitness. Said she was concerned about the home environment. I refused. She offered me money. I refused again. She suggested my license might be reviewed if I didn't cooperate." Ellis paused. I reported her to the nursing board. The complaint was dismissed. Insufficient evidence. But I documented everything and I keep very good records. Sienna's mind raced through implications, strategies, angles of attack. Will you help me with the current case? I'll provide the original files and testify if needed. But Ms. Brooks, you should know, Vivian Ashford doesn't do anything without a plan. If she's coming for your daughter now, after all these years, there's a reason beyond simple grandmotherly affection. The call ended. Sienna sat in the quiet apartment processing. Vivian had tried this before, had lost before, had learned from it judging by the precision of the current petition. But she'd also left a trail, a witness who remembered. Documentation that contradicted the fabricated narrative. It wasn't enough to win, not yet, but it was enough to fight. Pickup at daycare was at 5:30 exactly. Zara ran to Sienna with the uncomplicated joy of a 4-year-old, who didn't understand that their world was fracturing, who thought the biggest problem was whether they could have ice cream for dinner. Sienna held her daughter close, breathing in the scent of apple shampoo and playground sand, and made a decision. She wasn't going to fight Vivian in court, not directly. Courts favored money and influence, and Vivian had both. But Vivian had also built her empire on image, the reformed woman, the successful businesswoman, the philanthropist who gave back to the community. That image depended on maintaining a specific narrative. If Sienna could crack that narrative, expose the foundation it rested on, the whole structure would collapse. It was risky, probably stupid. Definitely the kind of move that had gotten her suspended in the first place. But Sienna had learned something important during her 2 years serving food to Boston's elite. Rich people loved to talk when they thought the help wasn't listening. And Vivian's charity gala had been full of people who might know things they didn't realize were valuable. The guest list was public record. Donors above a certain threshold got listed in the program. Sienna pulled it up that night after Zara fell asleep, cross-referencing names against business databases, social media, news articles. 2 Superior Court judges, the police commissioner, 3 city councilors, a dozen CEOs. And on page 4, a name that made her stop, Marion Portman. The same judge assigned to Sienna's custody case had been at Vivian's gala, had eaten Vivian's food and smiled at Vivian's jokes and possibly accepted Vivian's donations. It might mean nothing. Portman had a reputation for integrity, but it was a connection, and connections mattered when building a case. Sienna opened a new document and started outlining. Not a legal brief, she'd lost the right to write those, but an investigation timeline, the kind she used to build for partners before they went to trial. Question 1. How did Vivian access sealed medical records? Question 2. Who took the surveillance photos and were they obtained legally? Question 3. What did Vivian actually want with Zara, because maternal instinct after 28 years of silence didn't track? The clock hit midnight, 1:30. 2. Sienna's eyes burned, but her mind was clear in a way it hadn't been since the suspension. She'd forgotten what it felt like to use her brain for something beyond remembering drink orders and managing shift schedules. Forgotten the satisfaction of finding the thread that, when pulled, unraveled the entire case. Her phone buzzed at 2:15, text from an unknown number. You should accept the settlement. Fighting will only hurt Zara. No signature, no context. No, but the timing, just hours after Amanda had mentioned the co-guardianship offer, suggested someone was watching, monitoring, making sure Sienna understood the consequences of resistance. She deleted the message and kept working. The surveillance photos in Vivian's petition had metadata. Sienna pulled them up, enlarged them, checked the file properties. They'd been taken over a 6-month period, which meant someone had been watching the apartment since November. The angles suggested a position across the street, probably the empty commercial building that had been foreclosed last year. The timestamps were all evening hours, when Sienna was at work, when the apartment was dark, when the only way to see inside was through the gaps in the cheap blinds. It might be legal, might not. but it established a pattern of premeditation that contradicted Vivian's position as a concerned grandmother just wanting to help. At 3 a.m., Sienna found something better. A business filing from 2019 showing Vivian as part owner of a property management company that had purchased the foreclosed building across from Sienna's apartment. Not suspicious on its own, Vivian invested in real estate, but combined with the surveillance photos, it suggested Vivian had been planning this for years, had positioned herself to gather evidence, had waited for the perfect moment to strike. The question was why? What made Zara valuable enough to justify this level of strategy? Sienna's phone buzzed again at 3:30. This time, a voicemail. She almost didn't listen, but insomnia made you do stupid things. Isaiah's voice, tight with something that might have been fear. "Sienna, it's me. I need to talk to you, not at work. Can you meet me tomorrow? There's something you need to know about the woman from table 7. The message ended. Sienna played it again, listening for context. Isaiah sounded scared. Actually scared, which didn't make sense because Isaiah didn't scare easily. 15 years managing Boston's most demanding clientele had given him armor against pretty much everything. Unless Vivian had gotten to him. Unless whatever she'd done or said or threatened had breached that armor. Sienna sent back a text. "Coffee shop on Tremont at 9? The response came immediately. "See you there." She didn't sleep. Couldn't. Her mind kept spinning through possibilities, constructing and deconstructing theories. By the time pale light started filtering through the blinds, she had 17 pages of notes and a migraine that felt like divine punishment. Zara woke at 6:30, cheerful and hungry. Sienna made scrambled eggs and toast, watched her daughter eat with the careful attention of someone trying to memorize every detail. The way Zara hummed while she chewed, how she arranged her toast crusts in a straight line before eating them. The serious expression she got when concentrating on cutting her eggs with a plastic fork. These were the moments Vivian wanted to own, to control, to erase Sienna from until Zara forgot what it felt like to be loved by someone who'd actually been there. The coffee shop was crowded with the morning rush. Sienna found Isaiah in a back corner booth, his usual composure replaced by something jagged around the edges. He'd been crying, recently, judging by the redness around his eyes. "Thank you for coming." He wrapped both hands around his mug like he needed the warmth. "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this." "Just say it." "The woman from table 7, Vivian Ashford. She came to see me yesterday at the restaurant." Isaiah's jaw worked. "She knows about the tax situation." Sienna went still. "What tax situation?" "The Oriate's been creative with its quarterly filings. Nothing huge, just enough to keep margins comfortable. I've been signing off on the paperwork for 3 years." He looked up, meeting Sienna's eyes. "She has copies, documentation. She said if I didn't help her, she'd send everything to the IRS." The migraine spiked. Sienna pressed fingers to her temples. "Help her how?" "She wanted photos of your apartment, said she'd already hired someone but needed interior shots to show the living conditions weren't appropriate for a child." Isaiah's voice dropped. "I said no, told her to go to hell. She asked if I wanted to go to prison for tax fraud, if I wanted to lose everything I'd built. Then she offered $15,000. You took it." "I took it." His hands shook. "She gave me a key. Said it was a spare you'd left at the restaurant once, that it was fine because she's family. I waited until you were at work, let myself in, took the pictures, the mess, the bills, the toys everywhere. I'm sorry, I'm so goddamn sorry." Sienna sat back. The coffee shop continued around them. Espresso machines hissing, conversations blurring into white noise. Isaiah had been her one ally at the Orient, the person who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd covered her shifts when Zara was sick, who'd slipped her extra hours during slow weeks, who'd remembered her birthday with a card and a $50 bonus. "She's going to use you." Sienna kept her voice level. "In court. You'll be the concerned manager who saw the living conditions and felt obligated to report them." I know. Isaiah wiped his eyes. That's why I'm telling you now. Before she can control the narrative, I'll testify. I'll tell them she blackmailed me, that the photos were staged, whatever you need. Your testimony won't matter if you're under investigation for tax fraud. Then I'm under investigation. He leaned forward. Sienna, there's something else. When I went to your apartment, I saw mail on the counter. There was an envelope from Bright Horizons, a bill marked final notice. I shouldn't have looked, but I did, and I know I'm behind on daycare payments. 3 months behind, $4,200. Isaiah's expression shifted into something almost gentle. She's going to use that too. Paint you as financially irresponsible. Show that Zara's care is being neglected because you can't afford it. Sienna already knew this, had been avoiding opening those envelopes because seeing the numbers made them real in a way she couldn't handle. But hearing it from Isaiah, knowing Vivian had accessed this information through manipulation and theft, turned knowledge into rage. I need you to do something for me. Sienna pulled out her phone, opened the voice recorder. I need you to tell me everything. When she approached you, what she said, how she paid you, what instructions she gave, every detail you remember, on the record. Isaiah talked for 20 minutes. Sienna recorded it all. Then she thanked him, paid for both coffees, and walked out into morning sunlight that felt too bright for the darkness she was carrying. The hearing was in 12 days. Vivian had evidence, money, influence, and a willingness to destroy anyone who stood in her way. Sienna had a retired psychiatrist's testimony, a recorded confession from a blackmailed witness, and documentation of Vivian's past attempts to manipulate custody proceedings. It wasn't enough, not to win outright. But it might be enough to create doubt, to show Judge Portman that Vivian's concern for Zara's welfare was less maternal instinct and more calculated acquisition. Sienna dropped Zara at daycare and headed to the public library. If she couldn't practice law, she could at least use a law library. The custody files from 1996 were archived but accessible. It took 3 hours of searching through microfiche and dusty file boxes, but she found it. Brooks versus Ashford Family Court Docket Number 96-FC-4721. The petition read like a mirror of the current case. Helen Brooks requesting guardianship of her 6-year-old granddaughter due to abandonment by the mother. Vivian's response claiming temporary absence for career development. Character witnesses testifying to Vivian's dedication to her daughter. A settlement reached before trial. Vivian retained custody, grandmother granted visitation rights. But tucked in the back of the file, Sienna found something the current petition lacked. A letter from Vivian to the court explaining her absence. She'd been establishing a nursing career in New York, building financial stability, creating a life that could support a child properly. She promised to return to Boston within 6 months, resume custody, provide the stable home her daughter deserved. The letter was dated March 1996. According to the employment records Sienna had already pulled, Vivian didn't return to Boston until 2019, 23 years later, long after grandmother Brooks had died. Long after Sienna had aged out of the system and into Harvard Law. Vivian had lied to the court in 1996, had made promises she never intended to keep, had used her daughter as a bargaining chip in whatever game she'd been playing, then discarded the chip once she'd won. Now she was doing it again, this time with Zara. Sienna photographed every page of the file, left the library with a manila folder full of evidence and a plan that was either brilliant or insane. She couldn't fight Vivian in court, the deck was too stacked, but she could fight Vivian in public, could expose the pattern of manipulation and abandonment to the people who funded Vivian's empire. The donors, the society figures, the image-conscious elite who'd been at that gala, writing checks to support a woman they thought was a philanthropist. Vivian had built her fortune on reputation. Sienna just had to show that the reputation was a lie. The plan required access to Vivian's inner circle. Sienna had exactly one pathway in, The Oriate's event calendar. Vivian's spa chain was hosting a wellness symposium in 8 days at the same venue where the charity gala had been held. 200 attendees, press coverage, Vivian giving the keynote on work-life balance and women's empowerment. The symposium needed servers. The Oriate provided catering for all events at the venue. Isaiah could get Sienna on the roster. It was risky, possibly career suicide if it failed. But Sienna's career was already dead, her license suspended, her reputation destroyed. She had nothing left to lose except Zara, and she was losing Zara anyway unless she did something drastic. She called Isaiah from outside the library. "I need a favor. The wellness symposium next week. Can you put me on the service staff? After what I just told you? After admitting I violated your privacy? You were blackmailed. You came clean. Now I'm asking you to help me fix this." Silence on the line. Then, "What are you planning?" "Something stupid and possibly illegal. But if it works, Vivian won't have the leverage to take Zara. And if it doesn't work, then I'm no worse off than I am now." Sienna watched traffic pass on Boylston Street. Ordinary people living ordinary lives that didn't involve fighting your own mother for the right to raise your child. "I need to be in that room. I need to see who she talks to, what she says when she thinks no one important is listening. Help me do that, and we're even." Isaiah agreed. Sienna added his name to the growing list of people who'd taken risks for her. Dr. Ellis with his files, Isaiah with his testimony. She wondered if it would be enough, or if Vivian's resources would swallow them all. The next 6 days blurred together. Work, daycare pickup, evenings spent building a dossier on Vivian Ashford that read like a criminal profile. The business holdings, the property investments, the charitable donations that coincided with tax write-offs and PR opportunities. The spa empire built on the image of a self-made woman who'd overcome hardship, conveniently omitting the hardship she'd inflicted on others. Sienna also found the thing she'd been looking for: Vivian's motivation. It came in the form of a press release from Ashford Wellness announcing a new brand partnership with a national retail chain. The deal was worth $40 million over 5 years. Contingent on maintaining the company's reputation for family values and community investment. The announcement included quotes from Vivian about the importance of legacy, of building something meaningful to pass down to future generations. Future generations, meaning Zara. The partnership announcement was dated 2 months ago, right before Vivian had started surveilling Sienna's apartment, right before the custody petition had been filed. The timeline wasn't coincidence. Vivian needed a grandchild to complete the image of a devoted family matriarch. Needed to transform from successful businesswoman to wise elder passing down her wisdom. Needed Zara as a prop in her brand narrative. Sienna felt something cold settle in her chest, not anger anymore. Calculation. She understood Vivian's playbook now, could predict the moves before they happened, could see exactly where the vulnerabilities lay. On day 7, Sienna received another envelope, this one by certified mail requiring signature. Inside, a motion for emergency custody filed by Whitfield and Associates. New evidence had come to light, they claimed. Sienna had made threats against Vivian, had exhibited erratic behavior, represented a potential danger to the child. The evidence was a text message screenshot, Sienna's number apparently sending a message to Vivian's number. "You took everything from me once. I won't let you do it again. Stay away from my daughter or you'll regret it." Sienna had never sent that message, had never even had Vivian's phone number. But the screenshot looked real, correct timestamp matching her number, the kind of threat that would justify emergency intervention. Vivian had fabricated evidence, was so confident in her power that she didn't even bother making the forgery subtle. The emergency hearing was scheduled for tomorrow. Judge Portman would review the motion, hear arguments, potentially remove Zara from Sienna's custody pending the full hearing. Sienna had run out of time. She called Isaiah. I need to work the symposium tomorrow, not next week, tomorrow. The symposium is next week. Then I need whatever event is happening tomorrow. Vivian will be somewhere public after filing this motion. She'll want to be seen, have an alibi, maintain her image, find out where. Isaiah called back 30 minutes later. Private donor luncheon at the Four Seasons, Vivian's hosting. 50 guests, intimate setting, discussing expansion plans for the spa chain. We're not catering it. Can you get me in anyway? As what? A guest? Sienna, these people will recognize you don't belong. Not as a guest, as help, kitchen staff, coat check, anything. I just need to be in the building. Isaiah was quiet for a long moment, then, I have a friend who works events at the Four Seasons. I'll call in a favor. But Sienna, whatever you're planning, don't ask, just get me in. The call ended. Sienna sat in her apartment, surrounded by evidence and legal documents and photographs of Zara that she'd taken every month since birth. 4 years of memories that Vivian wanted to erase, 4 years of showing up, being there, doing the work of loving another person even when it was hard and exhausting and thankless. Grandmother Brooks had done the same for Sienna, had chosen duty over comfort, had sacrificed her own retirement to raise a granddaughter that wasn't her responsibility, had died knowing she'd done right by the child Vivian had abandoned. Sienna wouldn't abandon Zara, not to Vivian's machinations, not to the court's judgment, not to the easier path of surrender. She opened her laptop and started writing. Not a legal brief, not a defense, a story. The true story of Vivian Ashford, compiled from public records and witness testimony and documentary evidence. The story of a woman who'd abandoned her child, lied to courts, manipulated vulnerable people, and was now attempting to acquire a grandchild for brand purposes. It was 3,000 words of careful documentation. Every claim supported by evidence. Every accusation backed by proof. The kind of thing that, if published in the right place at the right time, would destroy Vivian's carefully constructed image. Sienna saved 3 copies, sent one to her email, one to her, put one on a thumb drive, kept one in a cloud folder. Then she went to pick up Zara from daycare, held her daughter close, and tried not to think about what tomorrow might bring. The emergency hearing was at 9 a.m. The donor luncheon started at noon. Sienna had 3 hours to fight for her daughter in court, then 3 more to expose the woman trying to take her. She put Zara to bed with extra stories and gentle lies about everything being fine. Stayed up until 2 a.m. reviewing every document, every piece of evidence, every angle of attack. Dr. Ellis had agreed to testify tomorrow if needed. Isaiah's recorded confession was ready to submit. The 1996 custody file proved Vivian's pattern of deception. It still might not be enough. Judges favored stability, and Vivian represented stability. Money, resources, a 2-bedroom condo in Back Bay versus a studio in Roxbury, a trust fund versus an overdrawn checking account. But Sienna had truth on her side, and tomorrow she'd find out if truth mattered more than power. She fell asleep at 3:15, woke to her alarm at 6. Made breakfast. Got Zara dressed into daycare by 7:30 with promises she wasn't certain she could keep. Stood outside the building for 5 minutes, watching through the window as her daughter played with blocks, building towers and knocking them down and laughing at the chaos. Then Sienna walked to the courthouse, ready to fight. The courtroom smelled like old wood and recycled air, fluorescent lights humming overhead with the persistence of bureaucracy. Sienna sat at the respondent's table with a yellow legal pad and pen borrowed from the court clerk. No lawyer beside her because she couldn't afford one, and representing herself felt less like empowerment and more like walking into surgery without anesthesia. Judge Marion Portman entered at 9:03, her gray hair pulled back severe enough to suggest she didn't tolerate nonsense. Across the aisle, Vivian sat flanked by 2 attorneys from Whitfield and Associates, her navy suit probably costing what Sienna made in 3 months. The emergency motion took precedence. Whitfield's lead counsel, a man named Patterson with silver temples and a voice designed for closing arguments, stood to present the threatening text message. The screenshot appeared on the courtroom display, blown up large enough that Sienna could see the pixels. Her number, yesterday's date, words she'd never written. Your Honor, Ms. Brooks has exhibited a pattern of hostility toward my client that escalated to direct threats. We believe the child is at immediate risk and request emergency removal pending full custody evaluation. Portman studied the image. Ms. Brooks, did you send this message? Sienna stood. Her hands wanted to shake, but she locked her knees and kept her voice level. No, Your Honor. I've never had Ms. Ashford's phone number. That text was fabricated. A serious accusation. Portman's expression gave nothing away. Do you have evidence supporting that claim? I have phone records showing no outgoing text to that number on the date in question. I can provide them immediately if the court allows a brief recess. Patterson interjected smoothly. Your Honor, phone records can be manipulated or deleted. The screenshot came directly from my client's device, verified by our IT consultant. Verification can be purchased. Sienna pulled out her own phone, navigating to her carrier's online portal. I'm prepared to log into my account right now and show the complete message log. There's no text to Ms. Ashford because I never sent one. Portman considered this. Approach the bench, both of you. They walked forward. Portman took Sienna's phone, examined the screen, scrolled through 3 months of messages. Most were from daycare, a few from Isaiah about shift schedules, several from the landlord about rent. Nothing to Vivian, nothing threatening anyone. Mr. Patterson, your client's IT consultant, is he available to testify today? On short notice, Your Honor, we'd need to request a continuance. Yet you filed an emergency motion requiring immediate action. Portman handed back Sienna's phone. I'm denying the emergency removal request. We'll proceed with the original hearing date as scheduled. If you want to pursue the threat allegation, bring your consultant and be prepared for cross-examination. Patterson returned to his table. Vivian's face remained composed, but Sienna caught the tightness around her mouth. First point to the defense, though winning a skirmish meant nothing if you lost the war. Portman reviewed the main custody petition next, flipping through pages with the efficiency of someone who'd seen 1,000 similar cases. Ms. Brooks, you're aware of the allegations regarding your financial instability and work schedule? Yes, Your Honor. Do you dispute them? I dispute their relevance to my fitness as a parent. I work long hours because childcare and rent in Boston require it. I'm behind on bills because wages haven't kept pace with cost of living. Those are economic realities, not moral failings. Ms. Ashford's petition suggests your daughter spends excessive time in daycare, sometimes 12 hours daily. When I work double shifts, yes, but she's in a licensed facility with trained caregivers, not neglected or endangered. I pick her up every night, make dinner, help with bedtime. We read together, play together. I'm present in the ways that matter. Portman made a note. The petition also references mental health treatment from 4 years ago. Concerns about bonding difficulties with your infant daughter. This was the landmine. Sienna felt Patterson watching, waiting for her to stumble. I sought help for postpartum stress when Zara was 3 months old. 2 therapy sessions, brief medication course. The crisis passed and I recovered fully. Seeking treatment was responsible parenting, not evidence of unfitness. Ms. Ashford's medical expert suggests the diagnosis was more serious than you're indicating. Ms. Ashford's medical expert is reading falsified records. Sienna pulled out the folder Dr. Ellis had provided. I have the original psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Robert Ellis, who treated me in 2021. The document in the petition has been altered to include diagnoses he never made. Dr. Ellis is prepared to testify to that effect and has filed an affidavit confirming the forgery. Patterson stood immediately. Your Honor, this is a serious accusation without foundation. Our expert received those records through proper channels. Proper channels controlled by Ms. Ashford, who worked as a psychiatric nurse at the facility where I was treated. Sienna kept her eyes on Portman. She had access to sealed files and the means to modify them. Dr. Ellis's affidavit includes the original notes proving the alterations. Portman took the folder, read the affidavit in silence. The courtroom held its breath. When she looked up, her expression had shifted into something colder. "Mr. Patterson, I'm ordering an independent verification of these medical records. We'll recess for 1 week while a court-appointed psychiatrist reviews both versions and determines which is authentic. If Ms. Brooks's allegations prove accurate, we'll be having a very different conversation about who's fit to raise this child." Vivian leaned toward Patterson, whispering urgently. He nodded, stood again. "Your Honor, my client is concerned about the child's immediate welfare given these accusations. Perhaps supervised visitation. Your client just presented potentially falsified evidence to this court." Portman's voice could have frozen water. "We'll maintain the status quo. Ms. Brooks retains custody. Ms. Ashford is prohibited from contact with the child pending resolution of these discrepancies. We're adjourned." The gavel fell. Sienna exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Across the aisle, Vivian stood with deliberate grace, straightening her jacket and collecting her leather portfolio like nothing had happened. Their eyes met as she passed. Vivian's smile was small and private, the expression of someone who'd lost a battle but still held artillery for the war. Outside the courthouse, Sienna checked her phone. 4 missed calls from Isaiah, 2 voicemails. She listened to the first one leaning against the granite steps. They moved the luncheon, not the Four Seasons, Vivian's penthouse, private residence, invitation only. "My contact can't get you in, I'm sorry." The second message was briefer. "Never mind, I found another way. Meet me at the corner of Newbury and Dartmouth at 11:30. Don't be late." Sienna had 90 minutes. She took the T to Roxbury, checked on Zara at daycare through the window, her daughter painting at an easel, purple smears across her hands, and allowed herself 30 seconds of normalcy before heading back downtown. Isaiah was waiting at the corner in street clothes instead of his usual restaurant blacks, holding a garment bag and looking uncomfortable. "This is insane," he thrust the bag at her. "Completely insane and probably illegal." "What am I looking at?" "Server uniform from the catering company Vivian hired. My friend works for them, owes me enough favors that he's willing to look the other way for 1 shift." Isaiah pulled out a name badge. "Julia Martinez, server. You're filling in for someone who called in sick. You show up, serve drinks, keep your head down, don't engage with guests. 4 hours maximum." "What's the address?" "Penthouse unit, Exeter Towers. Security will have your name on the list." "But Sienna, if Vivian recognizes you, this whole thing falls apart. You understand that?" "She won't recognize me. Rich people don't see the help." Sienna took the garment bag. "They see uniforms and function. I'll be invisible." Isaiah's expression suggested he didn't believe that but had run out of arguments. "The luncheon starts at noon. Kitchen staff arrives at 11:45. Don't screw this up." Sienna changed in a Starbucks bathroom, emerging as Julia Martinez, black slacks, white button-down matching vest, hair pulled back tight, minimal makeup, the kind of anonymous professional competence that blended into backgrounds. She'd been doing this for 2 years, knew how to move through spaces without drawing attention, how to position herself where conversations happened without participants noticing her presence. Exeter Towers occupied a full block of Back Bay real estate, glass and steel rising 32 floors. Security checked her name against the list, waved her through to the service elevator. The kitchen entrance opened onto controlled chaos. 20 catering staff prepping hors d'oeuvres and arranging champagne flutes while a coordinator barked instructions about timing and presentation. Sienna grabbed a tray of salmon canapes and joined the rotation, another body in the machine. The penthouse was exactly what Sienna expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River, hardwood floors in that specific shade of expensive, furniture that looked like art installations. 50 guests circulated through the open-plan space, wealthy women in designer casual discussing wellness initiatives and brand synergies. Vivian held court near the windows, gesturing at her view of the city like she owned it. Sienna moved through the crowd, offering appetizers, listened, collected fragments of conversation the way she used to collect evidence. Two women by the bar discussed Vivian's new retail partnership, how brilliant she was to position the brand around family values. A trio near the kitchen entrance compared notes on Vivian's spa services, her commitment to employee wellness, her generous charitable donations. Everything perfectly curated to support the image. Then Sienna heard a name that stopped her mid-step. Marion Portman. The speaker was a woman in her 60s, silver bob and pearls, holding court with three others near the fireplace. Marion can't make it today, court obligations, but she sends her regards, said she'll catch up with Vivian next week at the museum fundraiser. How do they know each other? Someone else, younger, genuinely curious. Old friends. Marion's husband was Vivian's lawyer years ago when she was getting started. He helped her establish the first spa, worked out some legal complications. They've stayed close ever since. Sienna's tray tilted. A canapé slid toward the edge before she caught it, rebalancing through muscle memory while her brain processed implications. Portman's husband had been Vivian's lawyer. Portman knew Vivian socially, attended her events, called her a friend. And somehow that connection hadn't been disclosed during the custody proceedings, hadn't appeared on any conflict of interest disclosures. She needed to get closer, hear more, move toward the fireplace group with a fresh tray of champagne. The conversation had shifted to upcoming events, charity obligations, who was attending what gala. Sienna offered drinks, collected empty glasses, became wallpaper. Vivian's been so stressed lately. The woman with the silver bob again. This business with her daughter. Awful situation. But Marion says she's handling it beautifully, very composed under pressure. I didn't know Vivian had a daughter. Estranged for years, sad story really. The girl had problems, mental health issues, couldn't manage on her own. Now there's a grandchild involved and Vivian's trying to help. But the daughter is being difficult. Marion says the case is heartbreaking, watching a grandmother fight for a child when the mother is clearly unstable. The woman's voice carried absolute certainty, the conviction of someone repeating information from a trusted source. Marion Portman had been discussing the case outside court, had characterized Sienna as unstable to Vivian's friends, had done so while presiding over the custody hearing without disclosing their personal relationship. Sienna's hands steadied on the tray through pure force of will. This was judicial misconduct, grounds for recusal. Possibly grounds for investigation of Portman's entire history of cases involving Vivian. But proving it required documentation, witnesses willing to testify, evidence that couldn't be dismissed as hearsay. She needed to hear Vivian's side directly. Moved through the penthouse toward where her mother stood, now alone by the windows checking her phone. Sienna approached with the champagne tray, angling close enough to overhear if Vivian made any calls. Vivian glanced up, took a glass without looking at Sienna's face. Dismissed her with the unconscious entitlement of someone who'd never worried about being seen. Then her phone rang. She answered immediately. "Tell me it's handled." Patterson's voice, tinny through the speaker. "Judge denied the emergency removal. She's suspicious about the medical records, ordered an independent review." "How long?" "1 week. But there's another problem. Brooks brought Dr. Ellis's original files. Claims you altered the evaluation." Vivian's expression didn't change. "Robert Ellis is 80 years old and his memory is unreliable. Our expert will testify that the records we submitted are authentic." The judge seemed inclined to believe Brooks. "Then change her inclination." Vivian's tone sharpened. "You know what's at stake. The retail partnership launches in 6 weeks. I need this resolved before then. A devoted grandmother raising her granddaughter after the mother proved unfit. That's the story we need. Make it happen." Portman's getting difficult to manage. She's asking questions about our relationship. Marion will do what's expected of her. We've been friends for 30 years. She understands loyalty. Vivian ended the call, took another sip of champagne, and returned to her guests like she'd been discussing weather. Sienna backed away slowly, tray balanced, heart hammering against her ribs. She had it. Confirmation that Vivian was manipulating the judge, that the custody case was theater designed to produce a predetermined outcome, that the entire proceeding was corrupted from the inside. But a server's testimony wouldn't hold weight. She needed recording, documentation, something concrete that couldn't be dismissed or denied. The catering coordinator waved servers toward the kitchen. Time to prep the main course. Sienna followed, mentally cataloging the penthouse layout. Vivian's home office was visible through an open door, desk covered with papers and a laptop sitting closed. If she could get 5 minutes alone in that space, access Vivian's email or calendar, find written evidence of the communications with Patterson or Portman. "Julia, you're on dessert service." The coordinator pushed a tray of chocolate mousse into Sienna's hands. "Start with the fireplace group. Work clockwise." Sienna delivered desserts for 40 minutes, watching for opportunity. The guests eventually migrated toward the dining area for Vivian's keynote address about building legacy businesses. 15 minutes of prepared remarks, everyone's attention forward. The kitchen staff would be occupied with cleanup, security stationed at the main entrance, not monitoring internal movements. Sienna set down her empty tray and walked calmly toward the office. Pushed the door closed behind her, moved to the desk. The laptop was password protected, but the papers weren't. She pulled out her phone, started photographing. Email printouts between Vivian and Patterson discussing managing the judge's concerns. Calendar entries showing lunches with Marion Portman marked personal, but scheduled around court dates. A contract draft for the retail partnership with a section highlighted, "Brand ambassador must demonstrate strong family values and multi-generational appeal." The door opened. Sienna spun around, phone still in hand, and came face to face with Vivian. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Recognition dawned across Vivian's features, not immediate, filtering through the cognitive dissonance of seeing her daughter in server's uniform in her private office. Then her expression hardened into something ancient and familiar. "You always were resourceful. I'll give you that." Sienna's thumb moved across her phone screen, sending the photos to cloud storage before Vivian could grab the device. "You've been bribing a judge, manipulating evidence, all for a $40 million brand deal that requires a photogenic family." "I'm securing my granddaughter's future." Vivian closed the door. "Something you're clearly incapable of doing. Look at you, breaking into my home, stealing documents, so desperate you're committing crimes. Says the woman who falsified medical records and bought off witnesses. Who's going to believe you?" Vivian's voice dropped to conversational volume, intimate and cutting. "A suspended lawyer with money problems and mental health history, caught trespassing in my home while impersonating catering staff. Marion will have you arrested before you make it to the elevator. Marion Portman won't be judging my case much longer. Not after her conflict of interest gets reported to the Judicial Oversight Committee." Vivian smiled, not warmth, calculation. "You think you're the first person to threaten me? Do you have any idea how many complaints I've weathered? How many accusations I've buried? I've been building power in this city since before you were born. You're a minor inconvenience. I'm your daughter. You're evidence of a mistake I made at 27. Vivian walked to the window, looked out at her view. "I was supposed to be someone, build something meaningful. Instead, I got pregnant by a law student who disappeared the moment I told him, and suddenly I had this weight around my neck dragging me down. Your grandmother offered to take you. I gave you a stable home with someone who wanted to raise you. That was mercy, not abandonment. Grandmother Brooks died working 2 jobs to keep me fed. You sent $300 a month and called it parenting. I sent what I could afford while building a career, while becoming someone who mattered instead of some welfare mother in Dorchester." Vivian turned back. "Now I have resources, status, the ability to give Zara everything you can't, a real home, education, opportunities." She deserves better than a studio apartment and a mother who can barely pay rent. She deserves someone who actually loves her, not a prop for your brand. Love doesn't pay for college, doesn't guarantee her future. I'm offering her security you'll never provide on a server's salary. Vivian's expression softened into something practiced, the face she probably showed in interviews. This doesn't have to be adversarial. Sign the co-guardianship agreement. Let me help raise her. You stay in her life. I provide the resources. Everyone wins. Except I lose my daughter piece by piece until she forgets I exist. Then you lose her all at once when Marion rules against you, because she will rule against me. The evidence is overwhelming. You're barely functional, Sienna. Working 60-hour weeks, months behind on bills, leaving your child in daycare from dawn until dark. Any judge would remove her from that situation. Sienna's phone buzzed. Text from Isaiah. Security looking for missing server. Get out now. She held Vivian's gaze, refusing to let fear show. The photos are already uploaded. Evidence of your communications with Patterson and Portman. Documentation of the brand deal requiring a family image. If anything happens to me, they automatically send to the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. It was a bluff. She'd only sent them to her own cloud storage, but Vivian's eyes narrowed. You're lying. You want to test that theory? Keep pushing, keep manipulating, and watch your empire collapse when the Globe runs a story about judicial corruption and falsified evidence. Or you could withdraw the custody petition, leave Zara alone, and save whatever reputation you have left. You won't destroy me. You're too much like your grandmother, all principle, no pragmatism. She could have fought harder for you in 1996, could have exposed me to the court, but she backed down because she didn't want to hurt you. Vivian moved closer. You'll do the same. You'll surrender because you think it's better for Zara than dragging her through a public scandal. The statement landed like a knife between ribs. Sienna thought about Zara at daycare, painting with purple hands, building block towers. Thought about what the next weeks would do to her if this became a media circus. Thought about grandmother Brooks making the same calculation 28 years ago, choosing quiet defeat over noisy destruction. Then she thought about Zara growing up in Vivian's penthouse, being shaped into whatever image the brand required, losing herself the way Sienna had been lost. I'm not my grandmother. Sienna's voice came out steady. And I'm not giving you my daughter. She walked out of the office, through the penthouse, past guests who didn't notice her leaving, down the service elevator, out through the loading dock before security could intercept. 3 blocks away before her hands started shaking, 5 blocks before she let herself check if the photos had actually uploaded. They had, every page documented and stored, but she needed more than photos, needed testimony from Patterson or Portman, needed someone from the inside willing to confirm what the documents suggested. Patterson wouldn't flip. He was too invested in maintaining Vivian's business. Portman was untouchable behind judicial privilege, unless someone who knew about the relationship came forward first. Sienna pulled up her laptop at a coffee shop, searched for information on Marion Portman's husband, found his obituary from 6 years ago. Lawrence Portman, attorney, survived by wife Marion and daughter Sarah. Sienna cross-referenced the name against legal directories, found her practicing family law at a mid-size firm in Cambridge. Sarah Portman might not know about her mother's conflict of interest, but she'd know about the relationship between Vivian and the Portmans. Might be willing to confirm the connection if approached correctly. The firm's website listed Sarah's email. Sienna composed a message identifying herself, explaining the situation, requesting a confidential meeting. Sent it before she could second-guess the approach. Checked the time, 3:40, almost pickup hour at daycare. She made it to Bright Horizons by 5:25. Zara ran to her with a painting of indeterminate shapes, all enthusiastic explanation about how the purple was a dragon and the yellow was its fire. Sienna knelt down, held her daughter close, breathed in apple shampoo and poster paint. Mama okay? Zara pulled back, examining Sienna's face with 4-year-old perception. Mama's okay. Another lie. Just missed you today. They took the tea home, made mac and cheese for dinner because it was easy and Zara loved it, and Sienna's brain was too fractured for anything complex. During bedtime stories, Zara asked the question she'd been asking more frequently. When do I see Grandma again? Sienna's chest tightened. What grandma, baby? The pretty grandma, from the park. Zara's voice carried the simple certainty of a child recounting facts. She gave me cookies, said we're family. The park, 3 months ago, when Vivian had first approached. Sienna had thought it was a chance encounter. Now she understood it was reconnaissance, the beginning of Vivian's campaign to establish connection with Zara, create a relationship that could be weaponized during custody proceedings. That grandma isn't coming back for a while. Why not? Because she's trying to take you away from me. Because she wants to turn you into a brand asset. Because she's the same person who abandoned me and now thinks love is something you can acquire through legal proceedings. Because sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that take time to work out. Zara accepted this with the flexibility of childhood. Sienna read 3 more books, sang 2 songs, stayed beside the bed until sleep came. Then she opened her laptop and started composing her next move. Sarah Portman responded at 11 p.m. I'm aware of my mother's relationship with Ms. Ashford. I'm also aware that she didn't disclose it during your proceedings. We should talk. Tomorrow, my office, 10 a.m. Sienna confirmed. Spent the night not sleeping, reviewing documents, building the case. By dawn, she had a file folder containing Dr. Ellis's affidavit about the falsified records, Isaiah's recorded confession about Vivian's blackmail, the photos from Vivian's office showing coordination with Patterson, the 1996 custody file proving Vivian's history of manipulation, and now potentially testimony from Portman's daughter about the undisclosed conflict. It still might not be enough. Judges protected each other. The legal system had layers of insulation designed to prevent exactly this kind of challenge. But Sienna had learned during her suspension that the only real power came from forcing truth into spaces designed to bury it. Sarah Portman's office was in a converted brownstone, the kind of space that projected competence without ostentation. She met Sienna in a conference room lined with law books, coffee already poured, her expression carefully neutral. My mother doesn't know I'm meeting with you. That needs to stay confidential. Sienna nodded. I'm not trying to destroy your mother's career. I'm trying to get a fair hearing. Fair is relative. Sarah pulled out her own folder. My mother and Vivian Ashford have been friends for 33 years. My father represented Vivian in several business matters when she was starting out. Our families spent holidays together. I called Vivian Aunt Viv until I was 12. Did your mother ever mention representing her in legal proceedings? My mother doesn't represent anyone. She's a judge. Sarah's tone carried warning. But yes, she's presided over cases involving Vivian's business interests. Real estate disputes, vendor conflicts, nothing involving family law. Until now. Until now. Sarah pushed her folder across the table. This is my mother's calendar from the past 6 months, cross-referenced with court filings. Vivian filed for custody on March 15th. My mother had lunch with her on March 20th, another lunch on April 3rd, a dinner on April 18th. None of those meetings were disclosed in court records. Sienna opened the folder. Sarah had documented everything. Restaurant receipts, calendar entries, even a photo from social media showing Marion and Vivian at some charity function. Why are you giving me this? Because I watched my mother destroy her integrity piece by piece trying to help a friend. Because she's convinced herself she's being objective, that her rulings are based on law and evidence, but she's compromised and won't admit it. Sarah's voice wavered. My father would be horrified. He built his reputation on ethics, died knowing he'd never compromised. My mother is undoing that legacy because she can't see what Vivian really is. What is she? Someone who uses people and discards them when they stop being useful. She did it to you. She's doing it to my mother. She'll do it to your daughter if given the chance. Sarah met Sienna's eyes. I can't testify against my mother publicly, but I can file a complaint with the Judicial Oversight Committee as a concerned attorney who noticed irregularities. That complaint will trigger an investigation. Your case will be reassigned. How long? 3 to 5 weeks for reassignment. Another month before a new judge can familiarize themselves with the file and schedule a hearing. You're looking at 8 to 10 weeks minimum. 8 to 10 weeks of limbo. 2 months of Vivian having time to rebuild her strategy, find new vulnerabilities, apply pressure through different channels. But 2 months with an uncompromised judge, a clean proceeding, actual rule of law instead of purchased outcomes. File the complaint. Sienna pushed the folder back. I'll deal with the delay. Sarah nodded, started to say something else, stopped. Finally, my mother isn't a bad person, she's just loyal to the wrong people. I hope you understand that. Sienna thought about grandmother Brooks, loyal to a granddaughter who wasn't her responsibility, about Isaiah, loyal enough to confess his manipulation, about Dr. Ellis, loyal to documentation and truth. Loyalty could be the thing that saved you or the thing that destroyed you, depending on where you placed it. I understand. Outside, Boston was moving through its Thursday rhythm. Sienna walked to the public garden, found a bench near the swan boats and called the Judicial Oversight Committee. Filed a formal complaint citing Marion Portman's undisclosed relationship with a party in active litigation. The clerk took notes with bureaucratic efficiency, promised a response within 2 weeks, warned that investigations could be lengthy. Then Sienna called Dr. Ellis. The hearing's going to be delayed. Judicial conflict could be 2 months before we get a new judge. That's actually helpful. His voice carried the calm of someone who'd seen enough crises to know they ended. Gives me time to work with the Massachusetts Medical Board. If Vivian falsified records while employed as a nurse, that's grounds for license investigation. Could result in criminal charges. How long for that process? 4 to 6 months minimum, but it adds pressure. Vivian's facing potential fraud charges. Her brand deal is contingent on clean reputation, and now the judge in her pocket has been compromised. She's going to make mistakes when she feels cornered. Sienna hoped he was right, hoped Vivian's confidence would crack into carelessness, but mostly she just felt tired. The adrenaline from the courthouse and the penthouse had burned off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She picked up Zara at the usual time, took her to the playground instead of going straight home, pushed her on swings while the spring evenings stretched toward dusk. Other parents clustered on benches discussing playdates and kindergarten readiness and whether the new ice cream place was worth the premium. Normal concerns, regular lives. Zara jumped off the swing mid-arc, landed hard, laughed at her own daring. Sienna's heart seized for half a second before relaxing. 4 years old, learning to test boundaries, push limits, discover what her body could do. In 2 months, she'd be 4.5. 6 months after that, kindergarten. The years were disappearing faster than Sienna could mark them. Vivian wanted to own those years, package them for brand purposes, turn Zara's childhood into content for wellness blog posts and Instagram campaigns. The thought made Sienna's jaw clench. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Ms. Brooks, this is Detective Chen from Boston PD Financial Crimes Unit. Male voice, official cadence. We received a referral from the Massachusetts Attorney General's office regarding potential evidence in your possession related to judicial corruption. Are you available to come to the station? Sienna's brain stuttered. I didn't send anything to the AG's office. According to our records, documents were uploaded to their fraud hotline this afternoon at 2:47 p.m. The submission included your name and case number. The bluff, the lie she'd told Vivian about automatic uploads. Except she hadn't actually set up automatic uploads, had only sent the photos to her own storage. Someone else had forwarded them. Someone with access to her cloud account or Isaiah. She'd shared the account password 6 months ago when he needed to access her work schedule for shift planning. He must have seen the files, understood their significance, sent them forward without asking permission. I can come to the station. Sienna checked the time. Tomorrow morning? This evening would be preferable. We're moving quickly on this. 7 p.m. work? She agreed, got off the phone. Stood in the playground while Zara climbed monkey bars and her daughter's future pivoted on decisions being made in offices she'd never seen. At home, she called Isaiah. He answered on the first ring. Before you yell at me, I did what needed doing. You sent the photos to the AG. You were never going to do it yourself. Too worried about the consequences, about making things worse. But Sienna, they were already as worse as they could get. Vivian was buying a judge. That's not something you negotiate with. Now there's a criminal investigation. Vivian will know I'm responsible. Good. Isaiah's voice carried steel she'd never heard before. Let her know. Let her understand she can't just manipulate people without consequences. I spent 15 years watching rich people get away with everything because nobody had the courage to push back. I'm done being complicit. Sienna wanted to be angry, but exhaustion muted the emotion into something hollow. The detective wants me at the station tonight. Tell them everything. Show them the recordings, the documents, all of it. Burn it down, Sienna. Burn the whole corrupt system down. The police station smelled like industrial cleaner and bad coffee. Detective Chen met her in a conference room with a recording device and a stack of files that suggested he'd been working this case for hours. He was younger than his voice had implied, maybe 35, with the focused intensity of someone who actually cared about his job. Walk me through your relationship with Vivian Ashford. He clicked the recorder on. Start from the beginning. Sienna talked for 90 minutes, explained the abandonment, the custody petition, the falsified evidence, the judicial corruption, handed over Isaiah's recording, Dr. Ellis's affidavit, the photos from Vivian's office. Chen took notes, asked clarifying questions, showed no reaction to the details. When she finished, he sat back. This is going to get complicated. We're talking about charges against a superior court judge and a prominent businesswoman. The AG's office will want to build an airtight case before moving forward. That takes time. How much time? 6 months minimum, maybe longer. They'll need to corroborate everything, interview witnesses, gather additional evidence. In the meantime, your custody case is frozen. Frozen how? Portman can't proceed while under investigation. The case gets reassigned, but that process is paused until the criminal investigation concludes or clears her. Could be 8 months, could be a year before you see another courtroom. A year. 12 months of limbo, of not knowing, of Vivian circling and searching for new angles of attack. 12 months of Zara asking about the pretty grandma, of explaining why grown-up problems took so long to resolve. But also 12 months of no court-ordered supervised visitation. No co-guardianship agreement. No Vivian moving into Zara's life with legal protection. I can wait a year. Sienna's voice came out stronger than she felt. As long as Zara stays with me during the investigation. Custody status remains unchanged pending new proceedings. She stays with you. Chen closed his folder. One more thing. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? If Vivian figures out you're the source of this investigation, she might escalate. Sienna thought about the studio apartment, ground floor, windows that faced the street. Thought about the foreclosed building across the way that Vivian partially owned. I'll figure something out. She left the station at 9:15. Took the T to Roxbury in the dark, checking over her shoulder at every stop. Paid Mrs. Chen from 3B to watch Zara for an extra hour while she packed essentials, clothes, documents, Zara's favorite toys. Called Isaiah from the hallway. I need a place to stay, just for a few weeks until things settle. I have a spare room in Somerville. It's yours as long as you need it. Relief made her voice crack. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The room's small and my cat sheds everywhere and I'm a terrible cook, but it's safe and Vivian doesn't know the address. They moved that night. Sienna and Zara and 3 suitcases in Isaiah's car, driving through Boston while Zara dozed in the back seat. The spare room was indeed small, barely space for a double bed and a dresser, but the windows faced a quiet street and the lock was solid, and Vivian Ashford had never been here. Sienna put Zara to bed in the unfamiliar room. Her daughter barely stirred, used to upheaval by now, adaptable in the way children are when they have no choice. Sienna sat beside her in the dark, listening to her breathe, and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd set in motion: a criminal investigation, judicial misconduct charges, her mother's empire under scrutiny, the custody case frozen indefinitely, all the pieces she'd been moving for weeks finally colliding into something that might be justice or might be disaster, depending on how the next months unfolded. But Zara was safe, for now, for tonight. Sleeping in a borrowed bed with purple dragons in her dreams and a mother who'd burned every bridge to keep her. Tomorrow would bring new complications. Vivian would respond. Patterson would escalate. The investigation would demand more testimony, more evidence, more pieces of Sienna's life laid bare for examination. But tomorrow was 12 hours away. Tonight Sienna had her daughter, had allies willing to risk themselves for truth, had evidence that might actually matter, had chosen scorched earth over surrender and would live with whatever that choice destroyed. She thought about what Dr. Ellis had said. Vivian makes mistakes when cornered. Thought about Sarah Portman's words. She uses people and discards them. The war wasn't over, might not be over for a year, might stretch longer than that. But Sienna had stopped retreating, had turned to face the thing that wanted to consume her, had discovered she was capable of fighting with weapons she'd thought were lost when her license got suspended. Resourceful, Vivian had called her, like it was a compliment and an insult combined. Sienna would take it as both, would use every resource, every connection, every piece of leverage she could find, would be exactly as ruthless as necessary to protect the small person sleeping 3 feet away. She left the room quietly, found Isaiah in the kitchen making tea, his cat twining around his ankles. "You should sleep. You look like hell." "I'll sleep when this is over." Sienna accepted the mug anyway. "How bad is the tax situation? The thing Vivian used against you?" "Bad enough that I've got a lawyer now. Might lose the restaurant, might face charges, but that's a problem for later." Isaiah's expression was calm in a way that suggested he'd made peace with consequences. "I helped you because it was right. Whatever happens because of that, I'll deal with it. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in with my eyes open." He scratched his cat's ears. Besides, someone needed to stand up to her. Might as well be 2 broke service industry workers with nothing left to lose. They drank tea in companionable silence. Through the kitchen window, Somerville spread out in yellow streetlights and dark houses, people sleeping through ordinary Thursday nights. Sienna had almost forgotten what ordinary felt like. Might not remember it for another year, might not reach the other side of this intact, but she'd reach it, would claw her way there if necessary. Because the alternative, surrender, co-guardianship, watching Vivian reshape Zara into a brand asset, was worse than any consequence the fight could bring. Her phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? You haven't. I will take her from you, one way or another." Vivian, showing her hand, revealing the rage beneath the polish. Sienna screenshotted the message, forwarded it to Detective Chen, added it to the growing file of evidence that her mother was exactly as dangerous as the documents suggested. Then she turned off her phone, finished her tea, and went to sleep in a borrowed room in a borrowed apartment with her daughter breathing steadily down the hall. Tomorrow would be chaos. Tonight was peace. She'd take what she could get. The Attorney General's investigation moved with the speed of continental drift. 3 weeks became 6, then 8. Sienna worked double shifts at the Orient while living in Isaiah's spare room, building a routine that felt sustainable only because she'd stopped thinking about sustainability. Zara adapted to the new arrangement with 4-year-old resilience. declaring Isaiah's cat her best friend, and turning the small bedroom into kingdoms populated by stuffed animals and crayon declarations of ownership. Vivian went silent. No more threatening texts, no lawyers at the door, just absence, which somehow felt more menacing than confrontation. Detective Chen called every Friday with updates that amounted to still gathering evidence, and these things take time. The retail partnership Vivian needed launched without her. The corporation cited unforeseen circumstances in a press release that didn't mention judicial corruption but didn't need to. The wellness symposium got postponed. 2 of Vivian's spa locations closed for renovations. Sarah Portman kept Sienna informed through encrypted messages that read like dispatches from a war zone. Her mother had been placed on administrative leave. The Judicial Oversight Committee was conducting interviews. Patterson's firm was scrambling to distance itself from the case. But nothing moved toward resolution, just deeper into bureaucratic quicksand. Then in week 9, everything accelerated. Detective Chen called on a Tuesday morning while Sienna was getting Zara ready for daycare. "We need you at the AG's office today, 2 p.m. Bring everything you have." What happened? Vivian's accountant flipped, gave us 5 years of financial records showing systematic tax fraud tied to the spa business. Turns out the retail partnership wasn't just about brand image. She needed it to cover massive debts. The wellness empire is mostly leverage and creative bookkeeping. Sienna's hands stilled on Zara's jacket zipper. "How does this affect the custody case?" "It doesn't directly, but it establishes pattern of fraud, gives us leverage for a plea deal. She cooperates on the Portman angle. We recommend reduced charges on the financial crimes. AG wants to know if you're willing to be in the room when we make the offer. You want me there when you negotiate with her?" "She asked for you specifically, said she'd only talk if you were present. I think she wants to try one more manipulation, see if she can get you to back off." Sienna looked at Zara, who was attempting to tie her own shoes with the determined incompetence of someone who hadn't quite mastered the concept. "I'll be there." The Attorney General's office occupied the 15th floor of a building near Government Center. All glass walls and conference rooms designed for exactly this kind of confrontation. Sienna arrived at 1:50 in the only professional outfit she still owned from her Sullivan and Cromwell days, slightly tight now after 2 years of inconsistent eating. Chen met her at reception with a lawyer named Victoria Huang, who specialized in public corruption cases. Few ground rules. Huang walked them toward the conference room. "You're here as a witness and victim, not a participant in negotiations. Don't make promises, don't agree to anything, don't let her provoke you into statements we can't walk back. She's going to try to manipulate the emotional dynamic. Stay focused on facts." The conference room had a view of Faneuil Hall and too many chairs. Vivian sat at the far end of the table with Patterson and another lawyer Sienna didn't recognize, her posture suggesting this was an inconvenience rather than a crisis. She'd aged since the penthouse confrontation. New lines around her eyes, exhaustion showing through expensive makeup. The empire crumbling looked like stress wearing human skin. Their eyes met across the table. Vivian's expression flickered, something raw and quickly buried. Then her mask reassembled. "Thank you for coming." Sienna took a seat beside Huang without responding. Chen activated a recording device. Patterson cleared his throat, began the performance of representing a client who'd already lost. "My client is prepared to provide full cooperation regarding her communications with Judge Portman in exchange for immunity on the judicial corruption charges. She acknowledges certain irregularities in how the custody case was managed." Huang didn't blink. "Irregularities is an interesting word for bribing a superior court judge. Let's use accurate language or this conversation ends." Patterson adjusted his approach. Ms. Ashford had a long-standing personal friendship with Judge Portman. She may have allowed that relationship to influence her expectations regarding the case outcome. She regrets any appearance of impropriety. She regrets getting caught. Chen's voice was flat. "We have documented evidence of coordination between your client and the judge. Email communication, meeting schedules, a pattern spanning months. This wasn't friendship influencing judgment. This was systematic corruption. Vivian spoke directly to Sienna, ignoring everyone else. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to help Zara. You were trying to acquire her for a brand deal. Sienna kept her voice level. Your accountant gave them the documents proving the retail partnership was contingent on family image. I wanted her to have opportunities, a stable home, things I couldn't give you when you were young. You didn't want to give me anything when I was young. You left me with Grandmother Brooks because I was inconvenient. Now Zara's convenient and suddenly you're maternal. Patterson interjected smoothly. Ms. Brooks, my client deeply regrets the estrangement from you. She's prepared to acknowledge that the custody petition was premature and withdraw it completely. She's also willing to establish a trust fund for Zara's education. $250,000, no strings attached. In exchange, she asks that you don't testify regarding the personal aspects of your relationship in any criminal proceedings. The offer landed like a depth charge. $250,000. Zara's entire future education funded. No more working double shifts to save for college. No more anxiety about whether she could give her daughter the same opportunities Sienna had fought for. Just money, solving the problem that money could solve. Huang turned to Sienna. You don't have to respond now. We can discuss privately. But Sienna was looking at Vivian, seeing the calculation behind the offer. Buying silence wasn't about protecting Vivian from criminal charges. Patterson had other witnesses for that. This was about controlling the narrative, about preventing Sienna from explaining publicly what it felt like to be raised by someone who'd commodified maternal affection. About making sure the story that survived was sympathetic grandmother thwarted by unstable daughter, not manipulative businesswoman treating people like assets. No, Sienna's voice came out clear. Keep your money. I'll testify to everything. Vivian's mask cracked. You're going to destroy me over pride? Throw away $250,000 because you can't forgive mistakes I made 30 years ago? I'm going to tell the truth about who you are, what you did, how you use people and discard them when they stop serving your purposes, not for revenge, for the record. So the next time you try to acquire someone's child for brand purposes, there's documentation of the pattern. I'm your mother. No. The word came out harder than Sienna intended. Mothers show up. They do the work. They choose their children over their ambitions. You're the woman who gave birth to me and then spent 28 years pretending I didn't exist. That's not motherhood. That's biology without commitment. Vivian stood abruptly. Patterson reached for her arm, but she shook him off, turning to the window. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped into something quieter and more dangerous. You think you've won, that exposing me makes you righteous, but you're going to spend the rest of your life working minimum wage jobs, struggling to give Zara scraps of what I could provide, and eventually she'll resent you for it. She'll see what you denied her and she'll understand that pride isn't a virtue when it costs your child her future. The words were designed to wound, and they found their target. Sienna felt them lodge somewhere beneath her sternum, a splinter of doubt about whether she was choosing principle over pragmatism, whether Grandmother Brooks would have taken the money, would have swallowed pride for practical benefit. But Grandmother Brooks had also withdrawn her custody petition rather than subject Sienna to trial, had chosen peace over justice because she thought it was better for the child. And that choice had left Vivian free to abandon Sienna completely, had enabled all the harm that followed. Zara's going to grow up knowing her mother fought for her. Sienna met Vivian's reflection in the glass, that when someone tried to buy her, her mother said no. That's worth more than any trust fund. The meeting dissolved after that. Patterson requested a recess to consult with his client. Huang walked Sienna to a different conference room, ordered coffee that neither of them drank, and reviewed what testimony would entail. Grand jury proceedings, then potentially a trial if Portman and Vivian didn't take plea deals. Months of depositions and court appearances. Sienna's entire history exposed to public record, the suspension, the financial struggles, the postpartum treatment. Everything Vivian had weaponized in the custody case would be scrutinized again, this time by defense attorneys trying to undermine her credibility. It's going to be brutal. Huang's assessment was clinical. They'll argue you're a disgruntled daughter with mental health issues seeking revenge. They'll paint Vivian as a flawed but well-meaning woman trying to help an unstable child. You need to be prepared for how ugly this gets. Sienna thought about Zara in Isaiah's apartment, playing with the cat and drawing purple dragons. Thought about explaining someday why Mama had chosen difficulty over ease, had refused money that could have changed their lives. I'm prepared. She wasn't really. But preparation was overrated when the alternative was surrender. The grand jury convened 3 weeks later. Sienna testified for 6 hours across 2 days, walking through every detail of Vivian's manipulation. The falsified medical records, the surveillance photos, the blackmail of Isaiah, the coordination with Portman, the fabricated threatening text. Patterson's lawyers tried to rattle her during breaks, suggesting her testimony was revenge-motivated. But Huang had coached her well. Stick to facts, stay calm, let the evidence speak. The grand jury indicted both Vivian and Marion Portman on multiple counts: judicial corruption, evidence tampering, fraud. The news broke on a Friday afternoon, and by Saturday morning, every media outlet in Boston had picked up the story. Former Superior Court judge and wellness entrepreneur charged in custody case scandal. The Globe ran a feature investigating Portman's entire case history, finding 3 other instances where she'd ruled favorably for Vivian's business interests. The Herald quoted legal ethics professors calling it the worst judicial misconduct case in Massachusetts history. Sienna's phone rang constantly. Media requests. Former colleagues from Sullivan and Cromwell expressing support or curiosity. The disciplinary board calling to discuss her suspension in light of new evidence about Douglas Chen's corruption. She ignored most of it, focused on getting through shifts at the Orient and picking up Zara from daycare and maintaining some version of normal life, while the city dissected her family history. Then Isaiah got arrested. The tax investigation Vivian had threatened him with materialized into federal charges. 3 years of creative accounting at the Orient, signed off by Isaiah as general manager. The restaurant owner, who'd been conveniently absent from all documentation, claimed ignorance. Isaiah faced potential prison time for fraud he'd committed under pressure and rationalized as victimless crime. His arraignment was on a Tuesday. Sienna took the day off, sat in the courtroom gallery while Isaiah stood before a judge and entered a not guilty plea. His lawyer argued he'd been coerced, that the restaurant owner had directed the fraud, but the prosecutor had documentation with Isaiah's signature and testimony from the accountant who'd actually done the work. Bail was set at $20,000. Sienna didn't have $20,000. Had maybe $3,000 in savings after 2 months of double shifts. She called the bondsman anyway, tried to figure out payment plans, got laughed at for suggesting she could cover 10% of $20,000 on a server's income. Isaiah was released on his own recognizance after his lawyer argued he had no criminal history and deep community ties. Sienna met him outside the courthouse, both of them wrecked in different ways. They walked to a coffee shop without speaking, ordered drinks they didn't want, sat across from each other while the afternoon crowd surged around them. "I'm sorry." Sienna meant it to come out stronger, but it emerged thin. "This happened because you helped me. This happened because I committed fraud for 3 years." Isaiah wrapped his hands around his cup. "Vivian just accelerated the timeline, but the charges are real. I actually did falsify those documents. Under coercion from your boss. Under coercion plus a bonus structure that rewarded looking the other way. I knew what I was doing, made the choice to prioritize keeping my job over staying legal." He met her eyes. "I'm not a victim here. I'm a middle-aged man who convinced himself small crimes didn't count." "What did your lawyer say about trial?" That I should take a plea deal if they offer one. Testify against the owner, accept reduced charges, probably probation, maybe 6 months minimum security if the judge wants to make an example. Isaiah's voice stayed level like he was discussing weather. The restaurant's being sold. New owners want nothing to do with the legal situation. I'm unemployed effective next week. The coffee shop continued its chaos around them. Sienna tried to find words that would fix this, came up empty. Isaiah had risked everything to help her and was paying the price while she sat relatively intact. The math didn't balance. Come work at the symposium. The idea formed as she spoke it. Vivian canceled her wellness event, but the venue still has the date booked. I heard they're hiring for a different conference. Pays better than the Oriat. Isaiah almost smiled. You're trying to get me a job while I'm facing federal charges. You helped me when I needed it. I'm returning the favor. Your favor is going to be toxic by association once trial starts. Media's already asking questions about everyone connected to the case. You sure you want to tie yourself to another scandal? Sienna thought about grandmother Brooks working 2 jobs to keep her fed, about Dr. Ellis providing testimony despite retirement, about Sarah Portman risking her relationship with her mother to file a complaint. People didn't survive alone. They survived through networks of mutual aid, through showing up for each other when the systems failed. I'm sure. The job worked out. Isaiah started the following Monday managing catering for a medical conference. Hours better and pay slightly improved. Sienna kept her shifts at the Oriat under a new manager who didn't know about the scandal and didn't care as long as she showed up on time. Zara started pre-K at a public school with a sliding scale fee structure. Life achieved a fragile equilibrium that felt like standing on ice waiting for the crack. The crack came in the form of a plea offer. Vivian's lawyers contacted Huang 6 weeks before trial, proposing a deal. Vivian would plead guilty to evidence tampering and accept probation plus a substantial fine. In exchange, the judicial corruption charges would be reduced to improper influence with no prison time. She'd surrender her nursing license, pay restitution to everyone she'd harmed, and accept a permanent ban from filing custody petitions regarding Zara. Portman got a similar offer. Resign from the bench, accept a censure, avoid jail time. Both deals contingent on Sienna agreeing not to file civil suits for damages. Huang presented the terms over the phone while Sienna was folding laundry in Isaiah's living room. Zara was at school. The cat dozed on the couch. Outside, Somerville moved through its October afternoon. They're offering you permanent protection from future custody attempts. Huang's pragmatism was audible. She can never legally try to take Zara again. That's a significant win. She also avoids prison for bribing a judge and falsifying evidence. She avoids prison, loses her career, pays substantial fines, and gets branded as a criminal. The public record will follow her forever. Her business empire is already collapsed. 3 locations closed, the retail partnership canceled, her board forced her to resign as CEO. She's lost everything except her freedom. Is putting her in jail worth more to you than ensuring she can never threaten Zara again? Sienna sat down on the couch, displacing the cat. Thought about Vivian in a courtroom, being sentenced, walking into a prison cell. Tried to feel satisfaction at the image and came up with exhaustion instead. 28 years she'd spent constructing a life without her mother, building identity around the absence. Now she had the chance to destroy Vivian completely or accept partial victory and move forward. What happens if I say no? Push for trial? Trial's risky. Defense will attack your credibility, emphasize your suspension and mental health treatment. They'll argue Vivian was trying to help and you misinterpreted her actions through the lens of childhood abandonment. Jury might convict anyway, but it's not guaranteed. And trial means another 8 months minimum of depositions, court appearances, media coverage. Your entire life on hold while lawyers argue about what happened. And if I accept the plea, everything ends. Case closed within a month. You get permanent custody protection. Vivian disappears from your life. You can rebuild without looking over your shoulder. Sometimes justice is less about punishment and more about ensuring harm stops. Sienna thought about Zara asking questions about the pretty grandma, thought about explaining someday why that grandma went to prison, or alternatively why Mama chose to let her go free. Neither version felt satisfying. Both felt like trading one complexity for another. I need to talk to someone first. She called Dr. Ellis that night, explained the plea offer, the choice, the weight of deciding someone else's fate. He listened without interrupting, then was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't. His voice carried the texture of old paper. When Vivian came to me 30 years ago trying to get me to evaluate your grandmother's fitness, I reported her to the nursing board. The complaint went nowhere because she had connections, but I documented everything. Kept it in my files because I knew eventually she'd cross a line big enough that the documentation would matter. You waited 30 years for her to incriminate herself? I waited 30 years hoping she'd change, hoping the incident with your grandmother was an aberration driven by desperation. But people like Vivian don't change. They just find new targets. If you'd never filed for custody of Zara, she would have found some other way to exploit someone else. The pattern was always there. So you think I should push for prison time? Make sure she's punished? I think you should ask yourself what outcome protects the most people. Prison might feel like justice, but Vivian in prison is still Vivian, just contained. Vivian stripped of power, publicly disgraced, legally barred from the behaviors that caused harm. That's different. That's transformation through consequence rather than containment. Sienna sat with that overnight, woke up before dawn with Zara sleeping beside her in the small bedroom, Isaiah's cat purring at the foot of the bed. Watched pale light filter through unfamiliar windows and realized she'd been living in borrowed spaces for 3 months. The apartment in Roxbury sat empty, rent still being paid by automatic withdrawal, because she was too afraid to go back, too worried Vivian would be waiting, too convinced that safety required constant vigilance. The plea offer represented release from that vigilance, meant she could go home, could stop looking over her shoulder, could let Zara grow up without the specter of litigation hovering over every milestone. She called Huang at 8 a.m. I'll accept the plea, on one condition. Vivian has to make a public statement acknowledging what she did and why. No spin, no lawyer language, actual accountability in her own words. Huang was quiet. That's not standard. Most plea deals avoid public statements to minimize civil liability. Then she can go to trial and risk prison. I want her to own what she did, not for me, for the record. So when people search her name, they find the truth instead of her manufactured image. The condition nearly killed the deal. Vivian's lawyers argued it was punitive and unnecessary. Huang countered that public accountability was lenient compared to trial publicity. After 2 weeks of negotiation, Vivian agreed to a written statement to be read in court and published on the AG's website. No press conference, but permanent public record. The plea hearing was scheduled for November 15th. Sienna took Zara to school that morning, kissed her goodbye, promised to be there for pickup. Rode the T to Government Center in the professional outfit that still didn't quite fit, feeling like she was wearing someone else's life. The courtroom was packed with media and legal observers. Sarah Portman sat in the back, offering a small nod when Sienna entered. Dr. Ellis had sent flowers to Isaiah's apartment with a note. You did the right thing. Judge, a different judge, someone with no connection to Vivian, entered at 10 a.m. Vivian stood at the defense table in a gray suit that looked expensive but worn, her posture suggesting she'd forgotten how to project confidence. Patterson had been replaced by a public defender after Whitfield dumped her as a client. Even her legal representation had downgraded. The judge read the charges, asked if Vivian understood the plea agreement. Confirmed she was entering it voluntarily. Then came the moment Sienna had negotiated for. Ms. Ashford, you've agreed to make a statement for the record. Proceed. Vivian pulled out a piece of paper. Her hands shook slightly. When she spoke, her voice had lost its polish. I, Vivian Ashford, acknowledge that I engaged in systematic manipulation and fraud in an attempt to gain custody of my granddaughter. I falsified medical records, bribed a superior court judge, blackmailed witnesses, and conducted illegal surveillance. I did these things not out of concern for my granddaughter's welfare, but because I needed her image for business purposes. I used my daughter as I used everyone else in my life, as a means to an end. I'm guilty of the charges against me and accept responsibility for the harm I caused. She sat down. The courtroom stayed silent. Sienna watched her mother's shoulders curve inward, watched the weight of public admission settle like physical mass. This was the woman who'd spent 28 years building an empire on image, now reduced to reading a statement destroying that image permanently. The symmetry felt almost too perfect. The judge accepted the plea. Sentenced Vivian to 5 years probation, $300,000 in fines, 500 hours community service, and permanent prohibition from any custody actions regarding Zara Brooks. The nursing license was surrendered. The criminal record would follow her forever. Portman's hearing followed immediately after. Same outcome: probation, fines, resignation, permanent bar from serving as a judge. Her daughter Sarah testified as a character witness, voice breaking as she explained watching her mother's integrity erode. Portman wept openly. Vivian sat stone-faced through the entire proceeding. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Sienna pushed through without comment, found Isaiah waiting by his car 3 blocks away. They drove to pick up Zara from school in silence, both of them processing what closure actually felt like when it arrived. Zara ran out with a drawing of her and the cat, completely oblivious to the fact that the threat she'd never fully understood had just been permanently eliminated. "Mama, look! I made Mr. Whiskers purple!" "It's beautiful, baby." Sienna knelt down, held her daughter close, breathed in the scent of school paste and apple juice. "You want to get ice cream? It's Tuesday." Zara's logic was flawless. "Ice cream is for weekends. Sometimes Tuesdays are special." Sienna stood, took her daughter's hand. "Let's celebrate." They got ice cream, dropped Isaiah at his apartment, and continued to Roxbury, back to the studio that Sienna had been paying rent on for 3 months without living in. The foreclosed building across the street was empty. No surveillance, no threat, just an apartment that needed cleaning and a life that needed resuming. Zara explored the space like it was new, rediscovering toys she'd forgotten about. Sienna cleaned 3 months of dust and stale air, opened windows, let Boston noise filter in. Her phone rang constantly. Media requests, messages from Dr. Ellis and Sarah Portman, a voicemail from the disciplinary board about reinstating her license. She ignored most of it, made dinner, put Zara to bed in her actual bed instead of a borrowed room, sat in the quiet apartment and tried to recognize the person she'd become through the process of fighting. Harder than she'd been 3 months ago, more willing to burn bridges, less afraid of consequences because she'd survived the worst ones and was still standing. The disciplinary board called again the next morning. Sienna answered this time, expecting bureaucracy and getting something unexpected instead. "Ms. Brooks, this is Linda Morrison from the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers. We've been reviewing your suspension in light of recent developments. Given that Douglas Chen has been disbarred for the conduct you reported and given your testimony in the Ashford case, we're prepared to reinstate your license immediately if you're interested in resuming practice." The offer landed like a meteor. Sienna had stopped thinking about practicing law, had built identity around being a server, had convinced herself that chapter was permanently closed. "I'd need time to consider." "Of course. But Ms. Brooks, what you did took considerable courage. Reporting misconduct cost you your career but prevented ongoing harm. That's exactly the kind of ethical commitment the profession needs. We'd welcome you back." Sienna ended the call, stared at her phone, tried to imagine returning to Sullivan and Cromwell or any of the firms that had rejected her after the suspension. Couldn't picture it. That version of her life felt like it belonged to someone else. But starting her own practice, small cases, family law, helping people navigate the system that had nearly destroyed her, that felt possible. Felt right, even. Like everything that had happened was preparation for work she hadn't known she needed to do. She spent the next 3 weeks researching requirements for solo practice, malpractice insurance, office space rental. The math was daunting but achievable if she kept her shifts at the Ariat and built the practice slowly. Posted a simple website advertising family law services, sent emails to legal aid organizations offering pro bono work. The first client walked in on a Thursday afternoon in early December. A woman named Maria, 32, fighting her ex-husband for custody of 2 kids. The ex had money, expensive lawyers, a narrative about Maria's instability that sounded familiar. Sienna listened to the whole story, recognized every beat of manipulation and institutional bias, and took the case for a fee structure Maria could actually afford. "You sure you want to do this?" Isaiah asked that night. They were having dinner at his place, a weekly tradition now. Zara playing with Mr. Whiskers while the adults cooked. "Going back into the arena that suspended you?" "I'm not going back to the arena, I'm building a different one, where people like Maria don't get crushed by people with resources." Sienna checked on Zara, who was constructing an elaborate fort from couch cushions. "Besides, I'm good at this. Spent 2 years thinking I'd lost my purpose. Turns out I just needed to find a better version of it." The practice grew slowly. Word spread through legal aid networks about the lawyer who'd taken down a superior court judge and a wellness CEO. Clients came with complicated cases and limited funds. Sienna worked nights after her restaurant shifts. Weekends while Zara was with a babysitter Isaiah helped find. Sleep became a luxury, but purpose filled the gaps. Then 6 months after the plea hearing, Vivian sent a letter. It arrived on a Saturday in a cream envelope with no return address. Sienna almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside, 3 pages of careful handwriting explaining everything and nothing. The letter detailed Vivian's community service work, helping low-income women navigate social services, ironically. Described her therapy sessions working through childhood poverty and how she'd built her entire identity around not being poor again. Acknowledged that in her determination to never be vulnerable, she'd made everyone around her a target or a tool. Apologized specifically and extensively for the harm to Sienna, to Grandmother Brooks's memory, to Zara's sense of safety. The final paragraph read, "I don't expect forgiveness, don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that losing everything taught me what actually mattered, and I spent 60 years getting that equation backwards. You're a better mother at 28 than I ever managed to be. Zara is fortunate in ways I made sure you never were. I'm genuinely sorry for that. V." Sienna read it 3 times, filed it in a drawer with other legal documents from the case, didn't respond, wasn't ready to, might never be ready. But the letter existed as evidence that Vivian was capable of something beyond manipulation. Not redemption exactly, that required more than words, but maybe the beginning of actual reckoning. A year passed, then 2. Sienna's practice stabilized into sustainability. She hired a paralegal, rented actual office space in a shared suite near Roxbury Crossing, won more cases than she lost, built a reputation as the lawyer who understood how systems failed people, because she'd been failed by them herself. Zara grew, started kindergarten, then first grade, developed opinions about everything and the vocabulary to express them. Asked occasionally about the grandma from the park, and Sienna explained in age-appropriate terms that sometimes grown-ups make choices that mean they can't be in each other's lives. Zara accepted this with the flexibility of childhood, moved on to more pressing concerns like whether unicorns could be real if you believed hard enough. Isaiah's case resolved with a plea deal, probation, restitution, community service. He got a job managing events at a hotel, better hours and legitimate accounting. Stayed sober through the entire process, attended court-mandated therapy, emerged on the other side determined to live the rest of his life being exactly who he'd convinced himself he was during the fraud years. They stayed friends. Zara still loved Mr. Whiskers. Dr. Ellis sent birthday cards every year. Sarah Portman occasionally referred clients when she had conflicts of interest. The network of people who'd helped Sienna survive became the network she relied on to build something sustainable. On a Tuesday in March, 3 years after the plea hearing, Sienna got a call from a hospital. Vivian had listed her as emergency contact, the only family member on file. She'd had a stroke, not severe but enough to require immediate care decisions. Sienna stood in her office holding the phone, trying to decide what she owed the woman who'd given birth to her and then spent 28 years proving biology didn't guarantee commitment. The nurse on the line needed an answer about treatment authorization. Sienna gave consent, hung up, stared at case files covering her desk. She didn't go to the hospital that day, or the next. But on Thursday evening, after dropping Zara at Isaiah's for a sleepover, she drove to Mass General. Found Vivian in a semi-private room, right side weakened but recovering, her face carrying an exhaustion that went deeper than medical crisis. They looked at each other for a long moment. Sienna pulled up a chair, sat at a distance that felt safe. The nurse said, "You're doing better. Strokes are the universe's way of telling you to slow down." Vivian's voice was slightly slurred. "Turns out, even with nothing left to do, I couldn't figure out how to rest. Community service keeping you busy? Finished that last year. Now I just volunteer because I can't stand sitting still." Vivian adjusted her blanket with her good hand. "Thank you for authorizing treatment. You didn't have to. I wasn't going to let you die out of spite. That's more grace than I showed you. Or your grandmother." Vivian's eyes, still sharp despite the stroke, tracked Sienna's face. "I've been writing you letters, 2 years' worth. Never sent them. My therapist says that's cowardice disguised as respect for boundaries." Probably accurate. "They're in a box in my apartment. Storage unit, actually. Lost the penthouse in the settlement. If you want them, they're yours. If not, they'll end up in a dumpster when I die and someone clears my things." Sienna thought about 2 years of unsent letters, accumulated apologies and explanations gathering dust in storage. What do they say? That I'm sorry. That I understand why you can't forgive me. That watching you build a life out of nothing I gave you makes me prouder than anything I accomplished. Vivian's working hand twisted the blanket edge. "That Zara has your eyes and your grandmother's stubborn streak, and I think about them every single day knowing I'll never meet her. That I finally understand what my mother tried to tell me 30 years ago when I walked away. That some choices echo forever and no amount of success drowns out the sound." The hospital room hummed with machines monitoring vitals. Outside, Boston traffic created white noise. Sienna tried to find anger and came up with exhaustion instead. She was tired of carrying the weight of Vivian's choices, tired of defining herself against the absence, tired of the equation where forgiveness felt like surrender and grudges felt like prison. "I can't give you relationship with Zara." Sienna's voice came out firmer than she felt. "That's not mine to offer and you haven't earned the right to ask. But if you want to write to me, actually send the letters this time. I'll read them. No promises about responding, no expectations of reconciliation. Just communication without consequence. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because spending the rest of my life angry takes energy I'd rather spend on my daughter and my work. You don't get absolution. You get me deciding not to let your failures define my future." Vivian's eyes filled. She blinked the tears back quickly. "Thank you." Sienna stood. "I'm going to go now. They said you're being discharged tomorrow. You have someone to help with recovery?" "There's a service. I'll manage." Manage is different from being okay. I stopped being okay a long time ago, but I'm learning to live with the consequences of my choices. That's something. Sienna left the hospital as evening settled into darkness. Drove back to Roxbury through streets she knew by heart now, no longer the desperate geography of someone barely surviving. Picked up Zara from Isaiah's apartment, listened to detailed accounts of the movie they'd watched and the cookies they'd baked. carried her sleeping daughter up 3 flights of stairs to their apartment. Not the studio anymore, a proper one-bedroom they'd moved into 8 months ago when the practice started generating sustainable income. Put Zara to bed, made tea, sat at the table where client files waited and thought about Vivian alone in a hospital room, facing whatever years remained with nothing but consequences in community service and unsent letters in storage. The story didn't end with reconciliation, didn't conclude with Vivian transformed into someone deserving of redemption, or Sienna achieving perfect peace about her childhood. They were just 2 people who shared DNA and trauma, finding a way to exist in the same city without destroying each other. Sometimes justice looked like imprisonment, sometimes it looked like public disgrace and probation, and sometimes it looked like choosing to let someone live with what they'd done while you built something better from the wreckage they'd left behind. Sienna opened her laptop, sent an email to Maria updating her on the custody case they'd won last week, responded to a consultation request from a father trying to get visitation rights, scheduled 3 new client meetings for next week. The work continued because people kept getting hurt by systems that favored power over justice, and someone needed to fight for them. She was good at fighting now, had learned from necessity and refined through practice, had discovered that the skills you developed surviving could transform into the skills you used helping others survive. That sometimes the point of suffering wasn't the suffering itself but what you built from the lesson it taught. Zara stirred in the next room, called for water. Sienna brought it, tucked her daughter back in, stayed until sleep reclaimed her, looked at the small person who'd been the catalyst for everything. Vivian's manipulation, the legal battle, the career resurrection, the whole cascade of choices that led to this moment. Zara would grow up with a different story than Sienna had inherited, would know her mother had fought for her, had refused to surrender, had chosen difficulty over easy corruption. That was the real inheritance, not trust funds or opportunities money could buy, but the example of someone who'd stood up when it mattered and paid the cost of standing. Zara might resent the small apartment someday, might wish for advantages other kids had, but she'd never wonder if she was loved enough to fight for. And in the end, that was everything.